Welcome to our prophecy study this evening, and we're in Revelation chapter 7. We are probably going to finish Revelation 7 today, and we will start on Revelation 8. So I'll just give you a kind of a brief background of where we had come. We have in Revelation 7, in Revelation 6, we saw the four horsemen of the apocalypse. We saw the 144,000 Jewish people sealed. We have also come through the first six seals, and that was quite a bit of devastation. And then we came to the seventh seal. So we've done the first six seals. Understand that that has been 6 seals worth of devastation on planet Earth. We have also seen 144,000, 12,000 out of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. So we have seen those things, and now we're coming to the seventh seal. We will be getting to the seventh seal. Verse 16. Never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. This is talking about there was a multitude. This goes back to last time we met. There was a multitude under the altar. And John asked the angel, who are these people? Well, I should say the angel asked John, who are these people? And John said, well, you know. And so then he said, these are the people that have been faithful through the tribulation, and their robes have been dipped in blood. So these are people that were martyrs during the tribulation period, people who died. We're assuming this is somewhere around the 3.5-year mark of the tribulation. The peaceful beginning has already ended, and now much of the judgment is falling. So probably about 3.5 years into the 7-year tribulation, many people now have been martyred. So talking about those people who have been martyred in the first half of the tribulation, the angel says, never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. So if you look back at the first 6 seals, you'll see these are some of the things that have happened. So here is the shelter. So God is giving these people shelter. They've already been martyred. Now they're in heaven. Now they're under the altar. That's their shelter. And remember that they just came through the seal judgment. Now they have, even though they've been martyred, they are now home. They are now safe. They do not have to worry about any of these things. And God promises to shelter them. They'll not have to worry about any more scorching heat or thirst or anything like that. Isaiah 49:10, and we're looking at Revelation now. And what we have done through this study, and I understand it's been a long process. I don't know how many years we've been doing it now, but a number of years. And we started with the book of Daniel. And then we started going up through the Old Testament prophets. I wanted to use Revelation last in speaking about prophecy because so much goes back to these verses. Now, all these verses that we talked about when I did the study on Isaiah, we looked at this verse. So now, by studying all the prophets first and what Jesus said about prophecy, now we can recall some of those words and say, here is where they fit in. This was prophesied now during the time of Revelation, which is still future to us. Now these things are coming true. So Isaiah in 49:10 said basically the same thing as verse 16 did. Neither will they hunger nor thirst, nor will the desert heat or the sun beat down on them. He who has compassion on them will guide them and lead them beside springs of water. So a lot of these words are very similar to the angel that was telling about what's happening under the altar in the book of Revelation. So it says here, they will not hunger or thirst. But I'm going to tell you that they are going to hunger and thirst. Oh, but it's a trick. Matthew 5:6 says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." So now no longer are we physically hungering. Remember, you've got to remember this over and over and over again. I'm going to mention this. The physical represents the spiritual. We can see the physical, we cannot see the spiritual. We cannot see righteousness, but we know what it is to hunger and thirst. So now we can take that and relate it to righteousness, and we should have that same desire for righteousness that we would have if we haven't eaten for a few days, or if it's hot and we're out in the sun and we get very, very thirsty, how we really desire a nice cool drink of water. Well, now these people are looking for righteousness. These people in the tribulation, they've come through the tribulation. They're wanting to be God to avenge their lives. And so they're hungering and they're thirsting for the righteousness that is about to come, and we may see tonight. Verse 17 of Revelation 7, "For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes." What does this remind us of in the Psalm? Psalm 23. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." So, and it talks about, springs, he lays me down next to, cool waters and things like that. So here, God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. So here is the fulfillment of all the times that Jesus has talked about, not going to be any tears in our eyes anymore. Now, going forward, we're going to start with the seventh seal. So we've seen the first 6 seals. What can the seventh seal bring? Well, let's take a look. Remember, there's a lot of these paradoxes in the Bible that, we think of the conquering, coming king, but he came as a lamb. So here, the lamb and the shepherd, generally you think of the shepherd is the one that takes care of the lamb. But here, and many times in Scripture, Jesus is portrayed by both, or one or the other, either the Lamb of God, or the shepherd who leads us through still waters. So here's one of those kind of paradoxes, that Jesus is both the lamb and the shepherd at the same time. And there's also, and even though he's saying this in Revelation 7, we're going to see this one more time. Understand, right now we're midway through the tribulation period. We're not even close to coming towards the end of tribulation, and that's going to be called the Great Tribulation. So there's a whole lot more of bad stuff happening. So everybody cannot claim this promise that he will wipe away every tear, that there will be no more hunger or thirst. He can't make that claim at this point, halfway through the tribulation. He cannot make that claim for everybody in the world. He can make that claim for his people, for people that have named the name of Christ as their Savior. But there is coming a point where he can give this exact same promise to everybody in the world, because in Revelation 21, the only people left alive are saved people. And here he repeats it again. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There'll be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, nor pain. He didn't say that before, because halfway through the tribulation, there is still going to be more death. But he says now that we're getting ready to go into eternity, there'll be no more death, no more mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things have passed away. As of right now, midpoint of the tribulation, the old order has not been passed away. But by Revelation 21, you'll see when we get there, we can say that the old order has passed away. So now let's take a look at the seventh seal. So all that was kind of in between and introducing the seventh seal. The 6 seals we saw in chapter 6. The horsemen brought a lot of this death and destruction. The scrolls, the seals, each seal was opening another layer of the scrolls. The scrolls represented the deed to earth that only Jesus, the Lamb, was worthy to open. He has already opened the first 6 seals, and now there is a pause for the seventh seal. And when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half hour. So the seventh seal, we had 6 seals full of judgment. The seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half hour. Now, this is silence in heaven, not on earth. I'm pretty sure that at this time on earth, there's a lot of moaning, there's a lot of cursing. The men want to hide in the caves and have the rocks fall on them. So I'm sure there was a lot of wails and jeering and mourning and stuff like that going on in earth. But here it says in heaven, there was silence for about a half hour. Now in heaven, what we've already seen in the first chapters 4 and 5, what we saw was multitudes of people, beasts, angels, and elders, all praising God, all crying in praise to God. Glory, Hosanna, salvation in the name of the Lord. They were all shouting those praises to God. Now it's silence when the seventh seal is opened. So the beasts, we'll get to it when we see it again. Basically, it's the same beast, symbolize the same things that we saw in Ezekiel and a few others. And you always notice that they had 4 faces. And generally, the faces represent something. One is always a face of a man, then usually another one is a face of a lion, which is a king. One is usually the face of an eagle, which displays divinity. And then the other one is the face of an ox, which is a domesticated animal, which would represent the servant. So Jesus came as a servant. He came as a king. He came as divine, recognized by the eagle. And he also came in full humanity, which is the face of a man. So in short, that's what the beasts are. Occasionally, there is a different face in different prophecies that mean something, but that's most of those are the 4 faces in most of them. So we are not here in eternal heaven because it says that there was silence in about half an hour. Once we get into eternity in heaven, there is no more time periods. There couldn't be a half hour once we hit eternity because there's no time. It's eternal. It just goes on. There's no need for clocks. There's no sun. And we know we can count days right now because the sun rises and the sun sets. But God is the light. So there is no sunrises per se in heaven. So we can't tell the time of that. So therefore we can't tell a half an hour or 5 hours or whatever. In eternity, there won't be any time periods. Then verse 2, and I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. So look where it says, then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God. These are different than all the other angels we've seen because it has this article, and I saw the 7 angels. So when you say the 7 angels, it's talking about a certain group of angels, which distinguishes it from previous groups of angels that we've already seen. So let's take a look at these 7 angels. What do we notice about them? That they stand before God. Now, if you were to remember your high school English class, which you probably don't any more than I do, but in English we learn the such thing as present, as a perfect tense. And what perfect tense means was it's always happened in the past, it's happening now, and guess what? It's always going to happen in the future. That's called the present tense. And so that's what this standing before God is. They always have stood before God. They are standing before God now, and they are going to continue to stand before God. So that's the perfect tense, that they stand before God. Now, this could refer, and we've seen this before in Luke 1:19. The angel said to him, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And this is obviously about the baby Jesus. So he says, I'm Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. Gabriel very well could have been one of the 7. It didn't say that he's one of the seven, but this is about the only time where it says that there are angels that stand in their presence. That was their job, to stand in the presence of God, possibly. And I don't want to be dogmatic about this, but possibly they stand. We know what angels are. They're messengers. They're messengers of God. So it could be that they stand in the presence of God, and when God says, I want you to go and tell Daniel this, I want you to go and tell Mary that, that these angels that stand in the presence of God can be sent out on God's errands as his messenger. So God does use angels. We know that. We see it in Matthew 13:41. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out his kingdom, everything that causes sin and all to do evil. So here, now whether these are the seven angels, I don't know. But they do send out, God does send out angels to do his work. Now the seals are done, and we're getting ready for the judgments and the bowls of judgment. So the trumpets and the bowls of judgment. So we're going to be seeing seven trumpets, then we're going to get into seven bowls. So there are twice as many judgments as we've seen already coming up. Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all God's people on the golden altar in front of the throne. So here is another angel. Again, not one of the seven. There were seven that stood in front. Here is another angel. And it says that he was given much incense to offer. Incense, you go through the Old Testament. This is one of the reasons why we read the Old Testament. We find out what's happening in the temple, in the tabernacle, and when God was present in the tabernacle. One of the things that the priests did is they went in and they offered incense. Incense is equal to prayer. So whenever we see prayer and incense linked together an awful lot. So they were given much incense to offer. So when the prayers went up to God, so did the incense as a sweet smell to God. So again, here we go again. The physical represents the spiritual. We can't see, or in this case, smell prayer, but God does. He smells it in the sense that we smell incense. Incense is pleasant. And so the prayers are pleasant. So that's why, again, the physical and the spiritual come together. Incense goes up, the smoke goes up, the prayers go up to God. So he has got incense to offer. This silence is a pause for prayer. So in other words, we've seen 6 seals already. Now let's take silent, be still and know that I am God. Be still. Spend some time in prayer. When you're gone through a rough time, be it at work or whatever you're going through with family members, with, illnesses or any kind of things, it's good to stop, be quiet, spend some time with God, pour out your heart to him. He knows you. He loves you. He wants to hear from you. And this is prayer going up like a sweet smell of incense. Notice he was given much incense to offer, and they were the prayers for all God's people. So if it's all God's people, then it's going to be much prayer. Possibly these are all the prayers that maybe never got answered, prayers you didn't think God was hearing. Maybe some prayers, for whatever reason, didn't get through at the time you prayed for them. They're being stored up for whatever God's purposes are. But now he hears the prayers of all God's people. Then verse 5, then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. So much for the silence, right? Silence in heaven for a half an hour, and now he takes the incense and basically, my words, I've had enough. He is, and people are still, they'd hide under the rocks and the caves. And instead, with all these calamities coming upon them, instead of turning to God, they curse God even more. And instead of saying, oh, we're sorry, we recognize that this is our own sin coming back to haunt us. No, what are they doing? They're cursing God all the more. And I know God doesn't have a patience limit. I would, and if it were me, this would have been it. And I know God is ever patient, but there is going to time when he's going to take and hurl the fire to the earth. Thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Have we ever heard those things before? Yes, we've actually heard them many times. Of course, I've gone back and, like I said, we are looking at some of the Old Testament prophets. And isn't it funny that they prophesied the same things even though they were hundreds of years apart, and in this case, sometimes 1,000 years from the time some of the prophets spoke to the time John wrote this Revelation. So thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Let's look for these in other scriptures. Revelation 4:5. From the throne, this we've already looked at a couple of chapters back in chapter 4. From the throne came flashes of lightning, rumblings, and peals of thunder. In front of the throne, 7 lamps were blazing. These are the 7 spirits of God. So basically, same thing we just saw in Revelation chapter 7, except in this one, chapter 4, no earthquakes. Okay, but everything else, but no earthquakes. Let's look at another one. This is Revelation 11:19. So this one is still coming. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the Ark of the Covenant. And there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and a severe hailstorm. We hadn't seen hail before, so now we got everything else plus hail. If that wasn't bad enough that there was lightning and earthquakes and stuff like that, now we're getting a hailstorm on top of it. You're going to see that things are going to get worse. This is Revelation chapter 11. We're still back in 7. Revelation 16:18. Then there became flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, a severe earthquake. No earthquake like it has ever occurred since mankind has been on the earth. So tremendous was the quake. So notice it says never. Up to this point in Revelation 16, with all these earthquakes that have already gone on, no earthquake has been seen like this. The worst earthquake we've seen on this earth was Krakatoa. And when that blew off in 1600 or whatever it was, when that blew off, the earth actually dropped by 5 degrees. It had an extended winter. It's called the year without summer, because so much ash from Krakatoa went into the atmosphere that it blocked the rays of the sun, and crops failed all over the world, not just in the Mediterranean.
Are we talking earthquake or volcano?
So, well, oftentimes those go together, earthquakes and volcanoes. So an earthquake there are 3 different types of volcanoes, and the earthquakes are caused by sometimes the earth splitting, and so the magma comes up, and sometimes it's caused by collision, and 2 plates going together cause such friction that it melts the rocks and causes an earthquake. And so those are a couple of different ways that earthquakes are made, and earthquakes and volcanoes quite often go hand in hand. Yeah, so science teacher, science geek. So here are some of the Old Testament prophecies that may be talking about these times. Psalm 76, 8 and 9. From heaven you pronounced judgment, and the land feared and was quiet when you, God, rose up to judge, to save all the afflicted in the land. Psalm 18, verses 7 through 15. So that's quite a few verses, so I'm going to read that. This is Psalm 18, starting in verse 7. The earth trembled and quaked. The foundations of the mountain shook. They trembled because he was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils. Consuming fire came from his mouth. Burning coals blazed out of it. So again, earthquakes, what they don't mention volcanoes here, but when you're seeing the molten rocks, he parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and he flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him, dark rain clouds of the sky. Out of the brightness of his presence, clouds advanced, hailstones, bolts of lightning. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded. He shot his arrows and scattered the enemy. With great bolts of lightning he routed them. The valleys of the sea were exposed, and the foundations of the earth laid bare at your rebuke, Lord, at the blast of breath from your nostrils.
And
that's Psalm 18, verses 7 through 15. So that could be, again, David. David was a prophet. God gave David these prophecies. And again, he could have, looked in there. So answers to these prayers for vengeance and justice are about to be given. So he heard the prayers, he took the lamp, the incense, and he threw it onto the earth, rumblings, earthquakes, sounds of thunder and stuff like that. So now prayers for vengeance. Remember the crowd under the altar saying, how long before we're avenged? And well, they're about to be given. These, when we look at Psalms, they're called imprecatory prayers. They're calls for justice. Let's take a look at some of what David called for vengeance. 83, 14 through 18. As fire concerns, this is David praying. As fire consumes the forest or a flame sets the mountains ablaze, so pursue them with your tempest and terrify them with your storm. Cover their faces with shame, Lord, so that they will seek your name. May they ever be ashamed and dismayed. May they perish in disgrace. Let them know that you, whose name is the Lord, that you alone are the Most High over all the earth. David was hunted for like 10 years, had to hide in the cave. Enemies with his own family. His brother tried to rise up against him. And then his children some of his sons tried to rise up against him to take his throne from him. So he's had to flee not only from families, but he's had to flee from the Philistines and many other nations that were trying to catch him and kill him. David had many, many enemies, and here he's praying what's called an imprecatory prayer, and it's saying, God, wipe out my enemies, chase them, shoot them with your arrows, kill them. That's what David is praying to God to happen to his enemies. A prayer like this is not to be prayed in this age of grace. You probably have enemies. We have enemies today. We are not supposed to pray for the destruction of our enemies. We're to pray for their salvation. They're misguided. They're lost. Satan has won them so far. We need to pray for them, not pray for their destruction. And especially if they are unsaved, we don't want to pray that God would kill unsaved people, because they will always be unsaved. And we shouldn't hate any enemy so bad that we would assign them to hell. So we should pray for ours. So now that we're in the age of grace, we need to pray for their salvation. Deuteronomy 32:35 says, it is mine to avenge. This is God speaking. It is mine to avenge. I will repay. In due time their foot will slip. Their day of disaster is near, and their doom rushes upon them. So even when David was praying that God would act. And here it says, God says, a vengeance is mine. Never should a Christian say, I don't get mad, I get even. Oh, I know it's a cute little saying, but a Christian should never say, I don't get mad, I get even. It's not our position to get even, and we shouldn't even get mad, because Jesus said, if you are angry with your brother, you have committed murder, on his Sermon on the Mount. So he likens being angry to murder, and that is not our place. It was different back in the Old Testament, was not the age of grace. Other imprecatory prayers, just in case you're wondering, in case you want to look them up, Psalm 35, verses 4 to 6, Psalm 59, 13 to 15, and pretty much all of Psalm 109. So it's a comfort. It should be a comfort to us knowing that God's got this. We may not see bad things happen to these people that are hurting us right now. They may seem like they've gotten away with it. Some people are making money off us. Some people are climbing the corporate ladder by stepping on us. It's not our decision to be given out vengeance. That's up to God. Verse 6, then the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to sound them. The trumpets in the Bible are used to summon people for feasts, for news, for worship, and at the rapture. Those are all times when God will use trumpets. So basically, trumpets indicate that God is about to act. Back in Moses' time, when God sounded the trumpet, God was about to act and called his people. You will notice that these are going to these trumpets are now going to increase the judgment in intensity. God is about to answer Psalm 2, verses 5 through 6. Again, David writing, he said, he rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. So God will be doing the rebuking. He has installed his king on Zion. There is going to be time when God is giving all judgment to the Son, and he will cast the judgment forward. And this is what we call the altar of judgment. So we're going to leave off right there in Revelation 8, and we will pick up there next time. So some things to remember from our look so far: that vengeance is God's, his timetable is what's important, and he will avenge you of your enemies. We are not to do it. So until we can meet again, may the God richly bless you, my beloved.